I've always found the other thing that I thought was really interesting with podcasts, and I'm sure you've run into something similar, just you do a lot more like in-person events than I do. And I remember going to a conference in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was just there. I was actually like interviewing some people that were presenting. It was like a performance clinical seminar. And I remember people come up to me and they were like, "Oh my God, are you Danny from Doc and Jock?"
So first of all, my first question is, how are you?
I'm good. Great. Actually, the best way to answer that, people are like, "I'm okay." I hate that. They're like, "No, I'm fucking awesome, man. Like life's great. I'm like really, really fortunate. I'm excited to do stuff that I get to do. I get to spend a lot of time with my family. I get to help people in our profession that are worth helping, and it's fun to wake up every morning. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not, I've had plenty of times in my life where, you don't want to go to work. You don't want to wake up. It's a struggle and it's a bummer. Right. So like, I think when you find that thing you really enjoy and you really resonate with, where the work feels like, almost like it's not even work. That's pretty cool, man. So anyway, I hope everybody finds something like that they can do in their life. How about you? Like, do you feel the same way about what you're doing?
So I was actually looking for the podcast episode that I was listening to this morning, because what I do is I open up my calendar. I'm like, who do I get to talk to today? Not what do I have to do? Like it's like the stuff I laughed at when I was 20, like mindset change or like using different words. And now I'm like, oh, what do I have to do turned into who do I get to talk to? Because that's what I do. I talk to people. So do you. Who do I get to help? Who do I get to work with? I don't have to go to the gym. I get to go move. Like it's dumb, right? My 20-year-old version is laughing and going, oh, you sound
right.
It matters. I'll just say that to me anyway. So I was looking at my calendar and I was like, Danny, cool. Haven't talked to him in a while. I look at someone like you who talks a lot and I see what you write, say, all that. And I'm like, this is fun because we know each other enough, but I don't have to carry the whole conversation. There's some people who just don't talk a lot. And I'm like, this is fun because I'm not going to have to. So as I make breakfast, I listen to podcasts. Why wouldn't a podcaster listen to podcasts?
I do the same thing.
And this was making peace with your midlife career self. And it was the host was talking to a guy whose his job, and I'll get the title later, his job was like official mentor or like some crazy title at Airbnb.
Yeah.
So he essentially, his job at Airbnb was like to walk around and like be just Yoda. Like he didn't know how to code, but he's just like, I've done business for a while. Like, what can I impart on you to help you do all the things that Danny just said, which is be excited about the things that you do. And he's like, in an era where information is like, it was access to information. I could Google anything I wanted. I could find out who the 23rd president was in 5 seconds. Now with AI, it's like, I can put that in context.
Yeah.
And wisdom has to be earned. So he's like, this is the next level. He's like, if you're wise. So I was sort of I was listening to that, reflecting on it for myself, because that's what we do, right? We put ourselves in the context. Sure. And then I was putting it in the context of I get to talk to Danny today. And I was like, oh, if there was an example of someone, because he also, the episode, the Harvard Business Review podcast also talked about, well, what do you do with that? And I was like, oh, look what Danny did. And I'm going to give a crappy version of your backstory, right? But you were in the military, you're a military physical therapist. And then you hit a point where you were like, it's logically probably not, it's a safe play to stay where you are. Cause you were in Hawaii, if I recall.
Yeah, I was. You were awesome.
You were literally and figuratively in a really great place. Like,
I was in a great spot.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were like, there is a different road here. And I think I want to take it. And I can't remember, but I think you said some people were like, you might want to think that again. Or is that the best thing to do? And you leaped, and then the net appears. It does not work the other way around. It just doesn't. Right. And now you get to do what you do, but it couldn't have been linear. It's not everything's up and to the right? Because that's not how success works. But I was listening to this episode. I was thinking, I get to talk to Danny. I was like, oh, if there's ever art imitating life, Danny's the guy who is sort of like a living embodiment of this former Airbnb Yoda guy. You did that.
I appreciate that. I don't know. I whatever. I'm trying. I would try to get to what you're talking about, over the years and just try to improve. But, I think that it's funny because I feel like the same thing. I could say the same thing about you. Like I was writing some stuff down and I was like, man, I want to pick Jimmy's brain on this or that. Excuse for that term. I actually hate when people say that,
right.
but it just came out. And but you go from radio host, physical therapist, you work in the profession for a little bit, and now, you took what you were doing previously and you applied it in a way that, I mean, I just look at like the number of people on which you're able to have an impact on. When we're treating patients, it's very valuable, it's very important, and it's very compartmentalized as well, like one to one, right? So deep relationship, but with fewer people. And now you get to take your skill set of being able to be a high level communicator and highlight people in our profession, which no one was really doing that, to be fair, whenever you started PT Pintcast, and sharing, like, making people look cool that are legit like education nerds. You know what I'm saying? Like people that I think are cool, but not the average person probably like doesn't want to talk to somebody that's doing research or something like that. And I think that, for you, you've been able to take the skill set that you have and find this
I
unique
don't know if you can hear me.
middle
I
ground
think my internet
to
just
be able
died.
to use your like superpower to be able to share what you do with our profession. I think that's like probably the coolest thing so far that I've seen in the profession.
It's a little scary though, right? Which is, I'm sure you're familiar with, which is I'm going to take a leap here and then the net will appear. There weren't many people doing what you did at the time when you did it, right? I mean, there weren't that many people doing it. Are you losing? I think my internet's dying. Can you still hear me? Can you still hear me? You
Did I
still got
lose
me?
you? Was it me? I don't know if it was my
No.
internet.
So I got a lot of snow. It might be my internet because there's like trees down and stuff like that. But I can hear you
Oh
again.
shit.
I can hear you.
Anyway, yeah, no, I would say I'll double check and make sure. It got so cold here yesterday, they canceled school. Not
Yeah.
because of any
Oh,
weather. It just literally was cold,
how cold is too cold where you are?
like 17 degrees.
I mean, that's cold, but like there needs to be some ice or something involved. You know what I mean? Like, why?
Yeah, I know. My kids were like, hell yeah, we don't got to go to school. We're like, this is
Why?
dumb, man.
Wait, you're
We're
in
outside
Atlanta.
playing basketball.
You're in Atlanta, though,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's why. Yeah, you're not prepared for
Well, they got the Snowmageddon scare, and whatever it was, maybe like 10 years ago, and so
it.
if it gets cold, they'll shut it down proactively. And so anyway, no, we've been getting some pretty bad weather too.
Yeah, so that might be where we lost delay or whatever. But what I was saying, I sort of heard you say we have similar paths or like parallel paths, right? We were doing something and then we sort of veered and then veered back. So it's like you were a military physical therapist and you left and you were doing, but you've sort of come back to the core elements. If you were to break apart like the table of elements of what you were able to do, you just rearrange them, right? Because now you get to do what you loved or what you were good at in a different way. I'm sort of finding my way how to do that too, which is like, I love talking to people. I like finding out interesting stuff. I happen to do it, before PT and radio, where I just talk to like,
Yeah.
rock stars and stuff. And, but to be honest, the every listener to me was terribly interesting too. I feel like you learn a lot from people just by talking to them, but it really is possible because if you can focus on the value that you provide and the problem someone has, and when those two things are the same and you can see it, you're like, I can clearly see how us hanging out for a little bit in a relationship, professional, personal, will benefit you. And you can communicate that. That is often a thing. People are so frustrated. I could help all these people. I don't understand why they don't come to my clinic. It's like, how have you communicated that? Like, I told them I'm a physical therapist. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, there is a disconnect. Because it's simple, but not easy.
Yeah.
Show people that.
I think communication, and like, it's such a broad term, right? Like my wife has a stepsister that's in school. She's in college and her major is communications.
Yep.
And I'm like, what is that? What do you do with that? She's like, I don't know yet, but she plays lacrosse and, I don't know what she's going to do. How are you supposed to know what you're going to do when you're 18? Most people don't. Right. But like, I thought it was interesting because I'm like, that quite possibly is the most valuable thing to get good at. But I don't know if that's necessarily the place where you're going to learn it. Maybe it is. Maybe it is more formal. I'm not sure. But you learned it. How did you pick this up so well?
Well, all right. So, a long time ago, I did the morning announcements in 6th grade, and everything in my body said, "This is cool." I don't know what this is, but that's what you do a lot when you just figure stuff out. You do stuff like when I shot hoops and played basketball, I didn't care. Like I didn't get excited. When I played hockey, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I like it. So you do what just gives you the tingles, whatever you want to call it. So did the morning announcements in 6th grade. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I like it. Did that throughout middle school and high school. And then was like, what do I do with this? And the guidance counselor was like, that's communications. And I was like, okay, then you go to school. And what do you do when you get there? I probably should have paid attention more in class, but where did I do? I hung out in the college radio station, which was bad for mom and dad then because my GPA was like a 2.4. But I landed an internship at the Howard Stern show. and that radio station. So like
Ah,
on paper, traditionally I was not great, but I was like, I don't know what this is. The classroom is okay, but it doesn't give me the tingles.
yeah,
But you're right in that communication is everywhere. It's like, well, get good at this. Even though all my buddies were like bio majors or business majors, they're like, oh yeah, over here, Jimmy's over here making dioramas and giving PowerPoint presentations. That's school. But what I was learning was able to communicate with brevity, I think.
yeah.
But where did I learn that? That was your first question. I
Mm,
learned more in the hallways or the college radio station where it was just Lord of the Flies, man. You're on the air for 2 hours, or at an internship where it was structured, but not like we're going to make sure we understand what you're doing every single minute. You're going to complete these modules. It was like, hey, man, Steve called out sick and we got these 40 commercials that need to get made. Hey, you over there, new guy, you know how to like read? And you're like, yes, but I don't know how to use any of this technology. Like, we'll show you that in 5 minutes, man. Go bang these 40 commercials out. And your first 28 suck. And then your 32nd one is okay. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, man, this is sort of whatever. So I don't know, but what gives you the tingles? And to me, so there's 3
mm,
methods. It shows you how old I was when I was in college, right? There was newspaper, TV, radio. There was no social media. There was magazines,
sure.
but so I looked at newspaper and I was like, I'm going to write something or do stuff, and it's going to take a week to come out.
Right.
Sorry, not fast enough. TV, there was so much editing and stuff because everything was like, super basic TV, like, just clunky. And I was like, too long. And then in radio, I was like, so hang on. I turn this thing on. I say something, people hear it right now.
Yeah.
And they were like, yes. And I was like, that gives me the tingles. So I think the learning was just like figure out. I mean, I say this all the time. The distance between you and your potential audience, which could be the people you help or the business that might want to hire you, is the thickness of the glass on your cell phone. There's a girl on Instagram who does a channel where she tries to fail at stuff.
Hmm.
She applies to jobs that are like 11 levels out of her whatever. And sometimes she doesn't get them, but sometimes she gets a job that's 5 levels above what she should get. And she's like,
Right.
her goal is to fail. And she's like, well, when I succeed, which have I done? Because then she's like, I offered a brand something on my Instagram page when I had 1,000 followers and I asked for $10,000 and they gave me $2,000. So have I failed? It's like, well,
Yeah.
not really. So you just do the thing that gives you the tingles. And I think that's what you did, is like you were in the military. What was the thing that you didn't love it? Why did you want to get out? Or did you just see something different? Like, what was it? If you work in outpatient PT, you interact with your EMR a lot. You deserve to have an experience that's seamless and integrates all the things you might need to do, like a patient portal, marketing automations, and billing, all in one, all at an unbeatable value. That's what MW Therapy does. Switching over is a breeze. Take a test drive right now and see what you could do with them at mwtherapy.com. And where's your PT career license taking you? Get a driver's license, you can drive wherever you want. If you're a physical therapist with a license, you can provide physical therapy wherever you want. That's what Jackson Therapy Partners is there to do. Extraordinary patient care adventures with Jackson Therapy Partners. Perfect for PTs eager to make their mark. Do what you want to do, where you want to do it. See where your skills can take you at jacksontherapy.com. And if you've heard about this thing, we've had it on the show before. It's called remote therapeutic monitoring. And it could boost your clinic's revenue and help more people. Those 2 things are good. Find out how Physiotech can help you do that. That is Physiotech at their website, physiotech.ca. That's physiotech.ca. Maybe boost your revenues, your clinic's revenue by $290 per patient per quarter now with Physiotech.
Well, it's not that I dislike the military. I actually
Right.
did like the military, but it's like any big corporation. I think people view it as, it's this different thing. It's a government. It's the government.
Right.
So, you get promoted based on time, typically
Right.
time in service,
Hitting.
and but also you can see what your job is going to be
Right.
down the road, right? So like
Right.
I knew, okay, I make major, here's what my next job is going to be. Lieutenant colonel, here's what my next job is going to be. And I've seen this play out with all my friends that stayed in.
Right.
Like, and it's it's pretty clear.
So you can sit there and see what you look like in 10 years. It's pretty linear. I mean, there's some latitude, but it's mostly linear.
Yeah, and I tell you the thing that really got me is there's a question that people ask other people in the military, especially when they are more senior in rank, and they ask them. They say, "Hey, how much time you got left?" Like that's the question
Ah,
they ask each other, almost as if it's like jail, right? It's like, hey, how much time you got left till you retire? Is basically what they're asking. And it's rare. Sometimes you'll hear people and they'll be like, as long as they'll keep me around, like, and you're like, dude, this person is
they're in.
this is their jam.
Yeah.
And I've met people like that, and it's like they love it. They'll stay in for until they get kicked out, right? But the vast majority of people, they'll tell you, oh, I got 3 years, and then afterward, I'm going to do this, or I've got 12 years, and then after this, I'm going to do this, and so I could see what my bosses were doing, I could see what their bosses were doing, and and the other thing too is it's a big organization. So
Yeah.
I had a lot of things I tried to do on the performance side, on the injury prevention side, and some of the things I was able to do, and some of the things I was unable to do because of budgets and timing. And I remember I had this sort of plan that I put together. I wanted to hire a couple strength coaches and a couple athletic trainers, and I was going to really work on like proactive movement patterns and injury prevention, and instead of being reactive and trying to help everybody that's hurt, I wanted to make them better. Not only make them better, but like let's make them more fit. Let's improve their performance, and that improves everything for the soldier. So I had a lot of buy-in from senior leadership, like all the people that were the division commanders and brigade commanders are like, they're all patients of mine. And so I get like individual one-on-one attention from these people. And they're like, we love this shit, Danny. Everything you're doing is like helping the brigade commander or the division commander, who's he's in charge of 12,000 people, was one of my patients, and he was a competitive powerlifter, and he had torn his pec. So I took him through basically like a surgical rehab, got him back to competing again and feeling better than he did even before. And it was just some basic stuff that we had him work through that he just didn't even know about, right? Simple stuff. And so I'm like, I got this in the bag.
Right.
So I go to the decision brief and I get denied. And I'm like, dude, I'm bummed out. I'm like, what the heck, man? I'm like, we're talking about this. I think this is going to be really helpful. It's a drop in the bucket when you look at like cost. It was going to end up being a few $100,000 a year, which sounds like a lot, but dude, the amount of money that we were spending on injuries,
right.
Unfreaking believable. And the amount of money we would waste on other things. Like I remember I sat in on this, one of the first meetings that I was ever in. And at the time, our brigade was in Baghdad. So most of our, I had just got assigned to them. They were still over there. And I was on what's called like the rear D, so rear detachment. People that are hurt, they're like recovering, and some of the brigade is still there, but they were only going to be there for like another month, and they were coming back. So I'm there. I'm sitting in this briefing, and I have to update them on injuries and stuff like that. And the finance officer stands up and he goes, "Sir, I've got good news and I've got bad news." He goes, "The good news is we found $26 million in an account that we forgot about. The bad news is we got to spend it." This is September, mind you. The fiscal year rolls over in October. So he's like, "We got to spend it by this time." And we're like, wait a second, what? And if you don't know, the way the government budget works is if you don't spend what your budget is, it gets decreased by the amount that you saved the following year. So you're actually incentivized to spend it all.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah, we found $26 million. This is the following year, but we found $26 million in a freaking account we forgot about. You're telling me we can't put a couple $100,000 into people that are going to make our folks better? So anyway, I get denied, and I talked to the guy afterward, the division commander, and he's like, "Look, Captain Mattei, Army's a big ship, turns really slowly. It's just not the right time."
Right.
And I remember I was thinking, I was like, this is not where I want to be. I don't want to be on a big ship that turns really slowly. Like, I know this would help. And ironically, this is the shit that they do in the Army currently.
You're describing this now, right?
Yeah, no, this, like, I get it. It is a good idea. Yeah, it's like, it just was too early, and it was frustrating. And, for me, that was a big part of it, just seeing what my job was going to be and seeing how slow progress was going to be. But, then I ended up meeting Kelly Starrett and getting an opportunity to teach for his continuing education company, and really primarily take over as a tactical director for them, which was a pretty awesome job. Very hard to turn down, because it was like, hey, dude, you get a chance to go into the most elite military groups on the planet and talk to them about performance, injury prevention, work with their operators, work with their staff, work with their medical staff, their medics, like everything. And they're going to take you more seriously than if you stay in the military. And I was like, this is great. I still get to work with the group that I enjoyed working with. I just don't have to be employed by the military anymore.
So you bring up a really, and there's got to be a name for this phenomenon. I've experienced it. I have had companies that hire me, that I am their full-time employee, and I come in to help them communicate differently in various ways. I either
Right.
coach CEOs on how to give presentations or whatever, and then
Hmm.
do media for them. I have found the thing that you just described. When I am their full-time employee, my opinion matters very little. And when
Yeah.
I am a consultant that you pay me a ton more for, and I
Yep.
show up, I do a meeting, do a brief, do whatever, and then I tell people to do stuff, they listen to me more. Why is that? Help me figure that out.
I have no idea. And I would see this and I would actually feel bad about this because like I remember I got a chance I had a contract where we spent a few days a couple times a year with this military group that's very, very I don't know this way to put it. They're considered like a tier one group. So like very elite military group.
Okay.
And they have great coaches. They have the best of everything. And I remember coming in and what's funny is like the very first time that I went up there, I came up the day after Ryan Holiday came and presented on leadership, and I didn't know who he was at the time, but the head medic was like, "Good luck following that," and I was like, "I don't know who this is," and he gave me one of his books, and I was
Probably
like,
your
"Okay."
best not knowing who he was the
Yeah, that's right.
right.
Exactly. But I remember I was talking to the staff and you could tell like they didn't want us there. They didn't fucking want me there because like they're like, okay, dude, great. You're gonna come in here with some ideas. They're gonna think what you say is awesome. And then I gotta stick around and implement the shit you're telling them to do. Right. And like and coming into that environment, I remember sitting down with the guy that was the performance director, and I was like, listen, man, here's my goal. Like I don't want your job, number one. Okay. I don't want to move up here. I like where I live and I like my job. I don't want your job. But I know your job is hard. So you tell me, what do you think we can help you with to make your job easier and to help the operators, function better? And he was like, "You're the first person that's literally ever asked me that because like no one cares. Usually, they get you charge a bunch of money, you go in for a couple of days, you leave, you say some cool stuff, and then you leave." And for me though, he was like, "Listen, man." All these guys are banged up and we can only work with them so much. They need to be able to learn how to like take care of themselves and do some of this stuff on their own. And so for me, it was like, all right, instead of like all the coaches understand a lot of this, it was up to me to sell self-care to these guys that it was about performance and longevity and being able to function at a higher level for longer on the team they were on. And instead of just dumping a bunch of stuff on them, it was like, all right, we're gonna get these guys excited about what you're trying to implement, and we're gonna help you do it, and then we're gonna go that way because it is a tough thing to do. I'm not sure what happens when you're employed by somebody, but they view you as like it's an internal asset.
Right.
How much could you actually know?
Right.
Versus somebody comes in, it's like this shiny object thing. It's like,
Correct.
oh, this is an innovator over
New
here.
kid in class.
Don Draper walking in, and it's like,
Right.
no, man, I'm not any smarter than them. I just come from a different organization, and it's slightly novel, I think.
Yeah. I think what you just described too is you walked in and you might have had 20 chapters to teach. And then you asked the audience, or at least like the head of the audience or one of the members of the audience, like, but what would be most effective? And they were like, this. And you were like, oh, dude, I'm going to throw out chapters 1 through 15. We're just going to do, we're just going to do the last 5. But that's where less is more, because you could have spent your time and just blown hot air for 15 chapters or whatever you're going to teach. But you're like, we're going to double down on these 5 because you told me those are the things that are important. I can help you do those things. Plus, you asked him, so there's buy-in, and he's going to tell people. He's paying attention to us. He's not going to come blow hard and leave, and then we're just, we're down 10 grand. We clap. We spend half a day listening to this guy. And we got nothing out of it. That's important.
Well, and I think the other thing to keep in mind too is, honestly, it's really important to understand the group of people you're working with, right? Like
your audience.
Yeah, it's the what do they call it? Like psychographics of the individuals.
Yes, and so explain difference between, because I see you do this a lot, because the people that you talk with, the people that you coach, right? Change is coming. You understand very much the psychographic. I think when we were growing up, it was like, understand your demographics, and demographics are neat and they're cute. Psychographics are where everything wins, or where you win.
Yeah, and I'll preface by saying I'm by no means an expert on this, but this is the way that I look at it. And this was actually something that has really developed over the last, I would say, since I got out of school. I had some good mentors that were really about helping me understand how to relay information, and not everybody receives information the same way.
They're all communication terms. Keep going. Yes, the answer is yes to all of this.
And there's even there's an assessment. It's kind of like the DISC profile, but it's called I believe it's called the Berkman assessment. I don't know if
Yep.
you've seen this, but
That one, right?
it's actually really popular in like tech companies. I had a patient that was a kind of multi-time like tech founder, and he would have all his staff go through it. It's kind of a challenging that you need like a facilitator, but
Yeah.
basically the way that Berkman works is you have your own way in which you like to communicate to people, but you have your own way in which you want to be communicated to. And this is something that is really interesting. You may have somebody that's a very direct communicator. They're going to tell you what they think, but that doesn't mean they want to be communicated to that way.
Correct. Yeah.
And so you understanding like what motivates people. It's funny. I was talking to one of our staff members just yesterday about sales for PT Biz in terms of people working with us. And when I was talking to her about, I was like, listen, there's some people that they don't think that they can do anything. They don't think it's possible, and maybe there's not the right timing. But if it is right timing and they're lacking confidence, they need to be talked to a certain way where you're really building them up. There are certain people that are overly confident, and you have to understand you can challenge certain people, but you can't challenge everybody,
Right.
because you have somebody who's very overconfident and you're like, I don't know, big guy, let's take a step back. I'm not sure if it's going to be that easy. And then of course they're going to dig their heels in and they're going to be like, well, I'll prove you wrong. Versus it's funny what happens when you build somebody up and then you take them back down a little bit, and you can sort of like, you can play to their ego a bit, but then you can help them realize that there might be some things that they're missing. So for me, I always think of it as like, is this a very analytical person? Is this more of an emotionally driven person? And normally, and this I do this with patients too. Like you have to understand this with patient buy-in. If you understand with patient buy-in, you can apply it in
Yep.
really any way
Right.
outside of it, right? So, I think that's really, really important to understand, and also understand, like for me, like when I would go in and work with all these military groups, dude, this is a tough fucking environment to go into.
Yeah.
Like it is not. A, their bullshit meter's really high.
Right.
B, they have people like Ryan Holiday come in all the time, and it's novel to them to have just like the world's smartest people come in
Every
for a
day.
day because they have an unlimited budget. And it makes Ryan Holiday look cooler because he can say he works with so and so, right? So, when you step into an environment like that, for me, my best approach was always like, listen, guys, I know I'm the skinniest strength coach you're ever going to talk to, and I don't know everything, but I'm here to help you the entire time. Like, I'm here for you. If you have anything that's going on, we're going to work through that. My
Yeah.
goal is that by the time that I leave, you understand how to take care of yourself. And it wasn't about, it's your pitch at performance, right? Like, okay, your performance, you're going to team, whatever. But a big thing too is like understanding what breaks people down. And for a lot of people, it has to do with, in this environment at least, what are you going to do when you leave?
Yeah.
What's your life going to look like? Because you got a lot of time left. You got a lot of people you want to spend it with. You got a lot of things you might want to do. And you've given every day of your life to this military group. But as soon as you're gone, you're gone. All these assets, all these resources,
Go on.
totally gone.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about? What are we going to do over these next couple of days? And dude, as soon as you can relate to somebody and understand what drives them in that room, and maybe not everybody, because you're like, I don't have fucking kids. I'm on a hard charger. I'm going to do this forever, whatever. But as soon as you can get to a deeper reason of what motivates somebody, now all of a sudden I got buy-in, and I've not come in as I'm the authority, sit down, listen to me.
Right.
It's just like, let's just have a conversation. And that's such a better way of going about it in pretty much any situation I've ever been in.
Right. So you've highlighted the difference between like demographics, which are important. Those are like the superficial. This is a 37-year-old white male who lives in New York and all those things. Like that's surface, right? And if you only program to that or try to communicate to that, you're using the shotgun approach. This is funny how like my career also parallels this. That's broadcasting. What we're doing right now, well, we're still using microphones and cameras. So are we still Well, we want lots of people to listen. We're actually narrowcasting.
Right.
Because the people that are probably listening to us right now, because we're going to share this on your channels and my channels, yeah, they're probably PTs or strength people, whoever. Those are demographic information. Who you are, what do you do, how old you are, those are neat, right? But psychographic is forward thinking. What drives you? What results you getting on that Berkman test? Which makes me think of that love. Remember that Love Languages book that hit everywhere? That if you were dating someone, you had to freaking read that book. And then, but that was funny because just because you like to give gifts doesn't mean you like to get gifts. So your communication language and your receiving information language, your output or input, it might be different. And understanding what the drivers are that people are there for. And that's where when I teach people or I work with people to communicate and they want to talk about, we have this conversation called features versus benefits. And people are like, what is the benefit for me joining your group, your association, join something. And they're like, we offer 7 special interest groups. We offer access to these resources. And I was like, hang on, I asked for benefits and you gave me features. Now let's have this conversation. And then I frame it something funny where I go, no one brags about their friends with features. You tell your buddy that, yeah, right, friends with benefits. Benefits are what that person gets out of it. So I have a fun story that I do with this. I have a Jeep. It's red, 4-wheel drive, 4-door, and it's a hardtop, but the hardtop comes off. Those are features. If I wanted you to buy the Jeep, I would say, man, this Jeep, you pull in the parking lot, it's fire engine red. No, everybody's going to pay attention to you, man. Do you want attention? This is it. That's a benefit. The feature is the red paint. The benefit is attention. 4-wheel drive. Do you think you're ever getting caught in the snow in upstate New York, Jimmy? You're never getting caught. It's unlimited access. 4 doors. Dude, the party is always in your car. You're never leaving a man behind. And then the hardtop convertible is like, man, you go from covered to wind in your hair in 90 seconds flat. And that when you can touch on a psychographic, facts tell, stories sell. Facts are features. They tell. Benefits are emotional. And what you did there is you walked in, you're like, facts are out of the way. I'm here to help you. What are the things that bother you? Oh, I can help with 3 of those. I can't help with these other 3. And you focus on that. And now you're having a conversation instead of a presentation. And our brains are wired for one and not the other. We're trained to ignore presentations. Have you ever said to someone, man, I was talking to this guy and I was getting lectured to, and it was a positive thing? I'm not saying like lectures and lessons aren't good, but when a good professor gives a lecture and it feels like a conversation, you learn more. And we know this, but we don't do this. It's funny.
No, I think that's really well said, man. We pay attention to conversations and we ignore presentations. And I think back to, my time when I was teaching for Kelly's group. And what's interesting about it is we never had a slide deck ever.
Oh, really?
No, and it made it really hard, actually.
Sure, yeah, because that's usuly a guidepost. Yeah, okay. So how did these work? Like paint me a picture.
Well, I was a blank whiteboard would basically draw pictures and maybe a couple, like bullet point sentences. And it was heavily based on demonstration of concepts that applied to the movement patterns we were trying to improve. Right. So that, and I always thought, I was like, I don't know, like maybe it would help if you have slides and a visual. And I remember him telling me, I think it was, Steve Jobs said, if you need a PowerPoint to explain what you're talking about, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Correct.
So I was like, okay, cool. But I think about that. And even in the clinic, when we were working with patients, right, like we would draw things out on a whiteboard in terms of, how injuries occur and little stick figures and stuff that were just like, would make sense to them. But then also have a conversation about these things versus just, present on a topic. And I always find it so boring when you're like sitting through these PowerPoints and stuff like that versus, if you can get people involved, I think it makes so much more sense in terms of having to think through things. Even if you're wrong, even if you say the wrong thing, at least you're thinking through something and you're taking part in it. It makes it far more interactive. But I think that's a hard thing to do. You have to have a depth of knowledge. It's really, it's very much there, but then you also have to really think through, how does this apply to this current population?
Correct.
Because your scenario, I might bring up something like, a specific movement or something that applies to like runners, but it might not apply to somebody that's like, an Olympic lifter per se, right? So you have to understand whatever group you're talking to and have relevant stories and frameworks. They're going to make sense to them, which takes a lot of time on the back end to kind of think through that. So, I think what you're talking about with these conversations, first of all, you made me want to buy a red Jeep immediately, right? I'm in. Just tell me what it costs and I'll be up there.
Yeah.
And that is where I think most people they miss the mark, because we do a lot of sales training with people. And I'll tell you like a relevant story from actually this morning. So I've been working out with this guy that is a buddy of mine, and he and I coached baseball together, our son's baseball team, like a year or two ago. And I guess it was around Thanksgiving. He was like, "Hey man, what should I do for working out?" Like, this guy sells wine for a living. He's in
Good friend to have.
liquor sales.
Yeah.
Dude, this guy, if anybody likes wine, this is your boy, because
Yeah.
you talk about selling through stories.
Oh, I bet.
I don't even like wine, but he'll be like, these grapes were in a Roman,
Mhm.
cistern that someone was, grinding with their feet in someone's AD or whatever, and it still exists today. And it's just bio farming. And I'm just like, yeah, dude, I'm in.
Sell
Yeah,
me. Give
let's
me.
get one. But we ruck march every Wednesday morning, and I told him at Thanksgiving, I was like, okay, you can come work out with me, but you got to do what I say. You got to do what I do. I'll modify for you, but I work out from 6 until 7, Monday through Friday. And if you want to come, cool. It's like, just don't be late. Like, don't come late
Right.
because you're going to ruin my workout. He has missed a freaking day, not a single day. And he's lost like ton of weight. He's not taking prescription medication anymore. He's like in such a different place in his life physically. But this morning we were rucking, right? So we're walking as fast as we can with a heavy backpack on. And he just said, so he was like, man, it's shocking to me how undervalued physical therapists are. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, you've told me what like the salaries of PTs are, and junior sales reps for the company that he has make more money than people that are literally helping people change their life physically. And he's like, it just doesn't make sense. And then he's like, I just don't understand it. And I was like, you're right, man. And there's a mismatch there. But I think when we look at what we help people do, which is take your skill set and apply it in a way where you have your own cash-based practice where you can increase your, take-home pay, even if you're mediocre at it by 50%, you're learning a skill that applies to the skill that the market already sees value in, probably more than you think it's valuing it. Like
Correct.
my friend values it far more. It's
Correct.
way more. But now you're doing it in a way where you have to learn something different, which is sales, right? You have to learn how to sell.
Also
And
seems a bad word too sometimes.
well, it is, but I told him, and I was like, okay, you tell me how you sell. This morning, I was like, tell me how you sell wine, and he's like, well, I want to know what their problem is. Like, why are we talking? What are they trying to do? I want to see what they're doing currently. From there, I'm going to have an idea. I'm going to give them a plan of what I think they need to do, and then we're going to work on implementation of that and see if it's the right fit. So I'm like, dude, that's a fucking soap note. You literally just did an evaluation where you did a subjective, objective assessment and a plan. Like, that's it. And we already know how to do that. And then when we get a chance to teach somebody how to sell what they're doing, it's the same thing. They're doing the same thing. They're just a slight tweak on it. And it makes a huge difference in their ability to control what they're doing with their career, So I think it's a huge skill that everybody should learn.
Does the profession, and now I'm going to be general because I don't want to, I'm not trying to single anybody in our profession out. You can't single anybody in profession out. But if you were to look at PT generically, is one of the reasons why we aren't making more money or bringing the equivalent value for our skills is because we try to treat too many people the same way in the similar process. Like, if we don't care, just come to our clinic, we can help you. But we keep communicating that we're physical therapists, not that I can change your life. To me, I want to sell the beach, not the seat on the airplane.
Right.
Don't sell the seat on the airplane.
So I think there's a couple factors. I actually thought about this morning. This is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, is because I think that there's a discrepancy. There's a discrepancy in the value that people see and feel when they get a chance to work with people in our profession. And let me caveat that by saying good people in our profession, because there's great clinicians that are trying to be amazing at what they do. And then there's people that they just want a job and they're just riding it out to do something else. And if you're really good at what you do, this is where we see people that end up going more in the cash-based route, is like, if you're trying to be really good at what you do and you're in an environment where mediocrity is the standard, you're slowly going to die. And then you're going to move to do your own thing, right? But like, there's a big discrepancy. And I think there's a couple things. Number one, insurance obviously doesn't reimburse us what we probably should be reimbursed, but that is what it is. There's nothing we can do about that.
What do you
say to insurance?
What do you say to insurance?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say fuck insurance. That's it. And that's the thing. You don't have to play the game You don't have to play the game if you're good at what you do.
That's the important thing that people need to see, especially with your book, right? Which I've told lots of people about it because it's fun to say fuck insurance.
But yeah, and it's and it's obviously nobody likes it.
Right. Yeah. That's the limiting factor.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is it is a job that is a lot of fun. Like, it's enjoyable. It is a good quality of life in comparison to most healthcare professions, right? Like, if you look at doctors, nurses, places, types of professions that we could have gone to school for. I remember I made a decision based off of spending time around orthopedic surgeons and physical therapists, and I wanted to become an orthopedic surgeon. And then I actually started spending time around orthopedic surgeons and physical therapists. And I was like, this is awesome. I come to the PT clinic and there's like bunt cakes everywhere, and people are coming in and hugging their providers they haven't seen in like 6 months. And I'm like, what is going on? This is awesome. It's like a fun environment, and it's like people around each other that they're like working to get back to whatever it is, post surgery or
Right.
injury or whatever it is. And I'm like, this is great. Like, I enjoy this environment. And orthopedic surgery seemed very stressful and crazy hours, and the pay is a lot more, but I didn't feel like it was worth it,
Yeah.
right? So I think people are taking the quality of life side because it means more to them than the pay, right?
Sure.
So I think that's part of it. But I think the other thing too is I don't think that there's a supply crunch on the number of clinicians we have. We have a lot of schools. We're pumping a lot of clinicians out. And if we get to a point where a lot of people leave the profession or that dwindles, then I think you're going to have to see pay go up because of supply and demand. So I don't think that's happening just yet. So that's my theory as to why they're so undervalued. But if you ask people, like my buddy that I train with, he's like, dude, just me training with you, and I don't charge this guy for this. Like, he just shows up and does what I do. It's like you've added like a decade to my life. Like, it's crazy. I don't know what that's worth, but it's worth a lot more than what insurance says we're going to get reimbursed for.
And the thing is, how do you communicate, or how do you get? I just gave away the answer. How do you get people to understand that without being buddies with Danny, or Danny spending time with people? Is you communicate that, right? And that's,
Yeah.
Sales isn't a bad thing. Selling something to someone that you knowingly can't help them or is bad for them, that's bad.
Right.
Selling something that can help someone do something is a service.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Well,
it's like a hammer.
especially we got to keep in mind, like, we actually have to be pretty good at selling because we are selling weird little exercises, painful hands-on techniques, and delayed gratification.
Right.
Like,
You're right.
it's not like we're selling ice cream. We're not selling some shit that everybody wants.
Right.
So, and that's actually something that I've noticed even with more of like I've noticed like with more of a non-clinical movement where clinicians, they're going to go and leave the profession and do something else. The transfer of their skill set is incredibly good for things like customer success, which is like kind of sales, internal sales light,
Right.
and actual sales, like learning how to sell things like software or whatever, right? And so you can have somebody that is a clinician that decides they don't want to do it. They can take that ability to be an active listener, a problem solver, and a little bit of sales training on top of that, and all of a sudden they can be, one of the top salespersons for a software company. And it's because we have this deep, understanding of people and an ability to apply a problem solution context to that. And that's valuable. It's super valuable, way more valuable, sadly, than helping somebody with their back pain.
Right. And we're we've got this almost to a fault, this altruistic need to help people, even at our own detriment, right? And that's a great thing to do, except, you got to put on your oxygen mask first sometimes, because some of those people are leaving the profession because they're like, well, I'm just so frustrated. It's like, well, you can do some of it, but you don't have to give the farm away, right? Well, you're providing a service. So you're net positive in terms of like outlook on the profession. I am too. Some people are super negative.
Yeah.
And it's easy to find those people. It's like Yelp. It's like when you go to Yelp reviews on a restaurant, you don't see a ton of really good reviews, because satisfied people go home and drink a bottle of wine after they have a great meal. They don't Yelp it as much as they probably should. But people who are pissed that they got 3 meatballs and not 4 on their, penne alla vodka, they will Yelp the crap out of that. So I think I think the honest temperature of the profession is a lot warmer, a lot more positive than you would see if you're on Twitter or anywhere. I think it is.
I agree. And I'm interested to, because like a lot of things have changed quite a bit over the last 10 years. And one thing that I see that's very disruptive in many industries is just the development of AI platforms and software. Yeah. And the thing is, man, I mean, I see it in a lot of different industries. So entrepreneur friends of mine that they're able to do more work with fewer people. One of my buddies is an attorney, and he had a paralegal leave and take another job. So he runs a small practice. It's just him and now one paralegal, but his one paralegal got so good at using legal AI tools that she basically replaced this other person. Now she's making more money because she's doing more
better
work, right? And he only needs one, but he saves on cost of another person because of that, right? So I look at our profession, and I think that there are some areas that it could be really beneficial.
Yeah.
Like I think it could if you don't have access to care and you're self-motivated, I think it could be very helpful. If you're like, okay, I don't know why my back hurts, but I'm going to type it in and see what I should do. Cool. I think that could be huge.
I think that scares crappy clinicians.
Yes, it
Because like,
should.
well, where's all the low hanging fruit going to go? And I'm like, hey man, again, and I don't know where I get the statistic from, but when people use statistics, it just becomes known. It's like 7% of people who need PT get PT. Have you heard that one?
I've heard something to that effect that like go to an emergency room. It's
Or
like percent
something.
of people. I
Right.
think it's based off of like a lower back pain study where they looked at how many of those people actually like saw a PT versus they just gave them like pain meds.
Right. And
Like
the idea there
so,
is we're arguing over the 7% and the 93%, we're just going, they just don't understand us. We're just going to pay attention. But you and I would notice, like, I would rather a shot at 93% of the population than a sliver of 7%.
yeah, and I think that there's a massive number of people that don't even know that we can help them, and frankly, a lot of people that would come to our practice, they wouldn't even set foot in a traditional practice. It's not the right place for them, and they know it, right? Like they view more what we do as like highly overeducated, coaches and trainers that
Right.
so happen to be able to do some hands-on stuff that can break a pain pattern, and they're looking at their health more as an investment and being proactive about it. Like
That's
I think people like a Peter Attia, Kelly Starrett, Andrew Huberman, like people that are talking about how do you maintain a high level of physical capacity for as long as you possibly can. Not necessarily performance, like, hey, we want you to be the best athlete ever. We want you just to be able to do what you want to do with the people you want to do it with for as long as possible. That
right.
group of people is growing. That population is growing, and they're looking for people like us that can actually help them out. But that's not the entire profession. That's a
Correct.
small percentage of the profession.
But you said something before. It's matching a solution to a problem. When you have a solution and you know there are people with problems, but they're not finding you, and you blame them, you're in trouble, man.
Yeah.
Whenever you start doing, they don't understand. The first thing I do, because I work in communications, again, so that's the lens I look through life with, for better or for worse. If they don't understand, the first person I look to is, did I not do it clear enough? Did I not do it loud enough? Did I not do it frequently enough? Where did I screw up? Because all it is, man, it's two tin can. I'm going to give a presentation at CSM for researchers, and people are like, Jimmy McKay should be nowhere near research. Why is he anyway? Because I'm going to show researchers why your research isn't getting any traction.
Yeah.
Why there's that often cited 17 years between publish and practice. And I'm going to say, you think you're scoring a touchdown when you hit the 15-yard line because you think a touchdown is being published in a journal. And I got news for you. The goal is understanding, not having published. The goal is results, not having gone to the gym. You want the thing that, so I just look at it as a communication issue. So when I see people either online or in person blaming the public doesn't understand and insurance doesn't understand, and I go, look at yourself first. Did you communicate it? Understanding that insurance, I'm going to give them a little benefit. They understand quite clearly, but their goal is to spend as little as possible for what the market is demanding. So I would say go focus on the market, because the people with the money, they don't care. Talk to people who have a solution or a problem that your solution can assist. That's the best option.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, if you look at our healthcare system, I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't see a third party payer system going anywhere anytime
It's
soon. If
not.
you look at United Health is one of the biggest companies,
I know.
in the world. They're massive, right? So, and also, I had a friend recently. They went up to Canada to go snowboarding the week of like Christmas to New Year's Day,
Right.
and her son broke his arm snowboarding, and they spent like 7 or 8 hours in a Canadian emergency room just to see a doc, and then another few hours waiting to get like their arm casted, and she's a nurse, and she was like, I have a new respect for the American healthcare system. And so I get it, because I saw the same thing whenever I was in the military. It's like, if you're about to die, it's awesome. If you're not about to die, you're going to pay a lot with your time, because it's socialized, right? It's like you got to spread that out across as many people as you can, and you're always understaffed. So, I think what we have is probably going to be there for the foreseeable future. I don't know, but what I see happening is I do see digital businesses, AI technology that is going to be able to help people that are motivated be able to do things, which I think is great, because it brings the cost of getting good information, getting help down considerably. Then it just comes down to a motivation factor. But that, honestly, it is the factor that's going to matter probably more than anything.
Correct.
If it's just access to information, like
We had that.
why wouldn't everybody be just doing so much better with whatever it is they're trying to do? Everybody has access to information.
As much as we love anatomy and physiology and neuroscience, we're in the behavior change business.
Right.
Mostly. There's some things, right? There's anatomy and physiology going on, right? But we're Yoda. Understand what path you're walking because I either walked it myself or I'm smart enough to understand because I've helped others walk that path too. And when you hit, so now we're talking about PTs or anybody who's frustrated with the system, you saw the same thing. There was nothing necessarily bad about the government or the fact that you were in the army. You just saw what it was in front of you and you're like, that's not for me. So I'm going to go a different route. I'm not going to sit here and rage against the machine and try to change everything. You took your shot. It didn't work. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just like, this isn't good for me. I'm going to veer off this path. That's what it was. For me, it was 2008 and the smartphone when I was driving home from the radio station with my first iPhone and I had my phone plugged into an aux cord. Remember we had to use for Bluetooth aux cords. And I was listening to KROQ, K-Rock LA in Pennsylvania. And I was like, oh, I can't be the third coolest guy in the afternoon on the radio in Scranton, Pennsylvania, because now I'm competing with the world. And this is 2008. And I got patted on my head and told, like, Chicken Little, the sky's not falling. Radio's going to be here. And not that radio isn't there, but it's different. Because I would say, what were we going to say?
Were you actually in Scranton, Pennsylvania? Is that for
real?
Yeah,
that's where I was. I was the third.
Was there just Dunder Mifflin stuff everywhere? Like, there's got to be. Does everybody reference The Office, by the way? Because I don't know anything else about Scranton.
I was there before the show was on. I actually, my morning guy was in the room. He interviewed Rainn Wilson before he was on The Office, and then while we were on The Office. So Rainn Wilson thought this was hysterical. So we would send boxes of T-shirts, stickers, paraphernalia with the logo on it to try to get it on the show to like the props department. We got the station logo on the show twice because if you're a fan of the show, you know there's a sticker in the office on one of the cubicles called Froggy 101. And that's a real radio station in Northeast Pennsylvania. It's like on Dwight's cubicle, Froggy 101. And when that hit, Froggy was a competitor. And they as they should have, as I would have, milked the crap out of it. Because it's like the country's #1 show, and your logo is multiple times. And the show is set in your town and all the B-roll. So we were there, and we made everything was Dunder Mifflin. To the point where people in Northeast Pennsylvania, I feel they were just like, no, I don't know Dwight. You know what I mean? I don't know Dwight. It's like when people are like, you're from New York City. Like, do you live at Times Square? You're like, yes, I live in Times Square. That's where people live. So it was funny because I was also an outsider. I was a New Yorker who was living in Scranton. So I was able to sort of see it through everybody else's eyes. I'm like, this is a big deal. They're like, this is Scranton. They're just making fun of Scranton. I'm like, I know, but they're making fun of you. That's a big deal. But a lot of the references, like Cooper's, there was a seafood restaurant called Cooper's.
Yeah.
That's where we would go to actual happy hour. That was a legit restaurant. It was as goofy looking on the outside as it was.
Oh my gosh.
But I saw that time and space weren't going to matter as much, which is a radio show like Doc and Danny on a local radio station wouldn't make sense because there's not enough people in the effective area of the antenna. But that makes complete sense as a podcast.
Well, the podcasting is crazy too, right? If you really think about it,
Wild.
like it's anybody can say whatever they want, right? Like for better or worse.
Correct.
And I remember I was listening to the Paleo Solution, I think. Rob, God, I forget his name now. Anyway, he wrote the first paleo book, and he had a podcast that when I got out to Hawaii, like right before I got out there, I started training CrossFit, and paleo was like all about it, right? So I remember I messaged them because they would answer questions.
Yeah.
And at the time, my wife had just had our son, and we would have leftover breast milk. And I'm like, are there performance enhancing elements in this? Because if there are, I'm going to drink it. Like I'm going to make a latte out of this. So I actually messaged him and I said, hey man, what do you think about this? Is there any merit to drinking this whatsoever? Right. And he'd break down research and different things. And I remember he answered my question while I was driving home from work, and he answered my question, and he kind of laughed out loud and gave his answer. But I was like, this is awesome. Like this guy literally just like broke this down of like, yes. And he actually basically was like, hey, no harm in doing it. Might as well give it a shot. Right. But I just thought this is powerful. This is powerful. Yes. Time and space
the hierarchy of you used to have an FCC license and $1 million to start a radio station
Right.
to be heard by just a few 100,000 people potentially. Because then you also, just because you're on the radio doesn't mean people are listening. People are voting with their time.
Right.
And then you go the other way, which is now to start a podcast, it's $20. I don't know if that, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Like
Now,
the monthly. Yeah.
right.
Whatever hosting. Yeah.
How do you now you're compete? It's before I gave you the features versus benefit story. Now it's signal versus noise, which is there is today as we record in January. Did you know this? It's the noisiest day in world's history. The most posts, the most podcasts, the most videos shared today versus any other day. But here's the thing:
Really?
tomorrow's going to be even noisier. It's because there's more people creating, right? So that's noise. But your thing is signal because I want to know about breast milk and paleo.
Yeah.
That's signal through noise. And how do you do that? I push back and say the answer is not complicated. The answer is simple, and they actually parallel exercise principles. So you want to get people to pay attention to you: frequency, intensity, time, type, volume, progression. That's it.
Yeah, I've always found the other thing that I thought was really interesting with podcasts, and I'm sure you've run into something similar. You do a lot more like in-person events than I do, and I remember going to a conference in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was just there. I was actually like interviewing some people that were presenting. It was like a performance clinical seminar, and I remember I had people come up to me and they were like, "Oh my god, are you Danny from Doc and Jock?" And I was shocked. I was like, "Yeah, you listen to it?" And it's like because it's a one-way channel,
Right.
and you don't really know. It's not like you can have a conversation.
Right.
And at the time, I think maybe we were doing, I don't know, maybe like 2,000 downloads a month, something like that. It doesn't mean 2,000 people. That means it's probably like,
1,000
I don't
people
know.
twice or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that, maybe even fewer. Let's call, yeah, 500 to 1,000 people, right? So, but in this little town, at this conference that I was at, a fairly small one, I ran into a few people that were just like, "Yo, dude, this is awesome. I love it." Like, and it's such an interesting thing to be able to share ideas. Even this is kind of strange to me that people even listen to what we have to say.
Yeah.
It's like,
I'm confused.
yeah, I still don't understand it, but as long as people keep listening,
Right.
I'll keep putting stuff out.
Well, so this touches on what we just talked about before too, which is psychographic. So yeah, you were in Asheville, North Carolina, but the world that you're talking to isn't infinite, right? The world
Right.
of strength and conditioning or performance, it's finite.
No.
And you're looking on a psychographic, which is those people, there's a bell curve, right? Certain people, as you mentioned, are just there to just go through the motions and be the bottom of the bell curve. There's a bunch of people in the middle, and there's a bunch of people at the top. And some of the people that differentiate go, I want to do a little more. And
Right.
podcasting is very frictionless, right? There's a lot of them. I can search,
Yeah.
searchable by topic, either episode or show, and I can find stuff. And that's more psychographic, which is people who are into stuff are going to seek out more stuff than the average person. And that's why when people are like, how do I make my podcast successful? I'm like, you can niche down and narrow down, or you can go wide. What fits for you is what exercise is the best exercise I should do, the one you're going to do, the one you like.
Yeah.
So you were having conversations that you were knowledgeable about or that you were confused about, but you were willing to do the work to take the audience from confusion to solution. That's
For sure. Well, with that podcast, what was cool about it is we just got a chance. It was an interview based one,
Right.
right? So Doc and Jock podcast. I actually don't even know if the feed even still exists, but the way that we looked at it, my buddy Joe, who I did the podcast with, it was, hey, let's talk to people that we think are the smartest in strength and conditioning, human performance, and rehab, and let's just see if we can get them on a call so we can learn from them.
right.
And that's exactly what we did. We would literally, it was so selfish, dude.
Yeah.
It was so selfish, and they all said yes, pretty much. And I was like, what an education opportunity that was for the years that we did it, to where we got a chance to just talk to so many people, like literally hundreds of people, and pick their enormous brain on the topic that they were really good at, with our individual questions of what we were trying to get better at. Like I remember we did a podcast with a sleep specialist, and Joe, who my co-host, He had legit sleep problems. We spent the entire hour talking to this guy about Joe's sleep problems and him giving him ideas of like what he should do to improve it. And it helped the shit out of him. It's super
But
helpful.
look at the
It was great.
look where the psychographic
Yeah.
comes in, which is if you had that sleep problem or treat people with similar sleep problems, this is the great life hack, which was I use it selfishly too. I was a PT student when I started.
Yeah.
I knew that I didn't read textbooks and get as much as my classmates. I value conversation over presentation. So I would write to, I was like, I have a paper to do on concussion. So I've told her this. I wrote to Becky Bliss, who was a concussion expert, and I had a conversation where essentially it was the assignment. I read to her in question form and she wrote it for me. I had to type it up.
Right.
And then I said, if you were going to use citations for a paper you're writing now, and she goes, oh, I have a Google Drive. I'll just send you the whole thing. It's a life hack. You don't have to have a podcast to use this skill, which is, especially if you're a student, play the student card. You're paying for it. But hey, I'm genuinely, this doesn't mean go spam DM people. What it means is people are always the solution. If the answer is a book, someone wrote it, for now anyway, before AI writes all the rest of the books. But somebody wrote it, somebody made the movie or made the video or made the podcast or did the guide or something, and they don't need to be number one. You could find value in the 39th best whatever. Like I am not tops on anything, but the secret to my podcast and also Doc and Jock, which is still on iTunes, which I've just found the page for there.
Oh, it is? Yeah, I don't dude, that was
episode was January 21, 2018. You wrote it was episode 249, and you wrote it, the title was The Last Episode for Now. But the secret to that was you did 249 repetitions.
Right.
And they still exist. I would love for you to open the dashboard of this. Do it after the show. When we're done, see if you can get the analytics and send me how many downloads you've had this month. Because you stopped doing it in, what did I say, 2018, and we're sitting in 2023?
It might be up, but I don't know if there's actually like a server connected to the episode. We should, if it's not, I should check it out because it's actually
to jump in and do a new episode and be like, does anybody still subscribe to this? And like, email me, I'll send you a whatever. Just see, because you stopped doing that, but the internet has an infinite memory.
Well, and I tell you, that was a really important project and a fun project to do with a good friend of mine, and a hard one to stop doing too, because at a certain point we kind of run out of time bandwidth, and what I started to notice was when I just started to share stuff about our practice, because I would get a lot of questions about it. I'd get questions about it whenever I would teach, and I would get questions about it whenever I would kind of like run out of things to do a podcast on. So I would talk about what I was doing in my practice, and I would get all these direct questions where people were like, what do you mean you don't take insurance?
Right.
Wait a second. How did you get to like multiple practitioners without, being in network with Blue Cross? And I started to realize like, wow, there's a lot more interest around what I'm sharing that I actually kind of didn't even know people would be interested in, or that we were even doing anything of significance or anything that was worth talking about until I started to share that and get feedback on it. So that is one other thing I would say about that podcast was it ended up kind of having me go a direction that I didn't expect. And honestly, really hard, decision to shut that project down because, you're talking about years with one of my best friends that we were up to. By the time we shut it down, we were at $60,000+ or $60,000+ downloads a month. And it was hard to see like where to go with it. I think was hard to say. Not to say it wasn't helpful. It just was like it's turning into a really difficult hobby, especially his wife was still in the military and they were moving a lot, and time zone change differences and trying to schedule with guests became really hard. But overall, man, what a great way to learn from other people.
Do you remember we were in Alexandria, Virginia having beers? I think
we got tacos. I remember it was awesome.
This was the first time we ever met in person. Yeah. And I think you were like, hey, I'm thinking about shutting this down. And I remember being like, no. I mean, I was like, I'm not telling you what to do, but I was like, why? Like, what are you talking about? But here's the great reason of why of a good reason to stop a thing that's pretty successful is it was the Trojan horse that led you to the other thing. So
right.
You're, and I'm just picking two, but you've had two from just what we've been talking about, sort of like forks that you've just decided to take the not necessarily obvious direction, right? you could have just stayed and been a, I don't know, general. I don't really know how the Army works or what the ranks are, but you could have kept going
I would have 100% become a general.
general. Why
I'm
not?
sure.
Why not? But you could have
Now,
stayed.
literally one in our core every time. Yeah.
But
But yes.
you veered and you took a different fork, and then anybody doing 60,000 downloads a month would have been like, this is the thing. I'm going to ride this out. But you kept taking the elements of the thing and making, so it didn't matter what you were doing. It was the why you were doing it. The how didn't matter. The what and the why did. And you just
Yeah. And I
kept doing
think
that.
I would say, I kind of think back on some of these things, and I it's it's hard to say if you're doing the right thing or not sometimes.
And
But the more we learn about like gut brain connection and the microbiome and the neurologic side of the gut, it's the more I realize that like this idea of like a gut feeling, this idea of like if something feels like you should do it, if something feels like it's the right decision I don't really understand how to explain it all that well, to be completely honest. But for me now, at this point, I'm a huge data nerd. We track everything in our businesses. Like it's very, very data driven, but even still, I'll look at data, and if I'm split on what I should do, always listen to what's my gut
yeah,
say. What do I feel like? Like what's the first thing that I think?
yeah.
The first response that I would take if I had to make a decision immediately, and I always go with that one because I've found that's usually right. It's usually correct.
Yeah. All right. We've been talking for an hour. Isn't that fun though? How many notes? I had no notes. I was just like,
Listen, man. Listen, before we jump, I have to ask you a
go
question
ahead. I
because
wasn't going to jump, but keep.
listen, all I do is break down businesses. All I do is analyze businesses, and I am so fascinated that what goes into the business of Jimmy. Like, because I know you're kind of into a bunch of different things, but like, what all are you doing? Like, what sort of feeds into
Yeah.
PT Pintcast? Like, what is it? Explain it in a nutshell. Like, what does it look
You're
like?
asking me at a unique time, and if you know me on the podcast, you sort of know me off the podcast. This is me. I am at a point in my life where I need to figure that out because the
Hmm.
podcast has led me to, and what did I say before? It's all about people. It's people all the way down, right? The beginning and end. The problem and solution is always people. I like to figure that out. I have done traditional jobs, either broadcasting radio, being a clinician, working at companies and doing communications. And I've just kept going and sort of mirroring, not, sort of doing what you've done, which is like, I don't know where I'm going, but I sort of like this vibe. I like this gut feeling, what I get to do here. Where that gets to go, I don't know yet. I've been a consultant, like companies will hire me and they're like, we don't have a marketing person, or we have a marketing person, but you say you do communications. What's the difference? And I'm like, marketing is very organized in their strategy and there's best practices. And the communications is sort of like where the human and the best practices collide. Because sometimes it's just like, I don't know, it just works. So I
Yeah.
get to do that as like I get brought into a company. I sort of look around and I go, hey, what do you do? And like, we do this. And I go, great. Now tell me what you do. Now show me where you explain that to the people that you serve. And they're like, it's on our website. I go, where? And like, it's in our value statement. And I'm like, that's 49 words. I'm like, no, you got to show me every day. You're not in all of us, no longer, because of smartphones. None of us are in business anymore. Everyone's in show business. Just show me. It doesn't mean you got to put on a show or you got to do a podcast. You got to do funny dances and reels. No, but you need to show someone why their life would be better than it is right now if you're in it, if you have a solution for their problem. And I think most organizations think that they can't do it or they need permission or they need a degree. And I'm like, I'm going to show you how I do it. I look at it like a soap note. What do you want the audience to know? What can you do? Okay, how can we do that in 5 ways for less than $50 today? Okay, now be a data nerd. I did 5 ways. One of them worked really well. Great. Let's triple down on that one for a while, and then let's check it in a month. So, but you're asking like what goes into the business of Jimmy is I'm figuring that out. I sort of have a coach I hang around with, and he's like, you got to either shit or get off the pot. Like, what do you love to do? Stop doing things to pay the rent. Take that leap. Like, quit the Army. I did that when I left clinical practice. I spent how much money and how much time being a physical therapist. And then I was like, I don't know what this is, guys, but my gut says I can do this in a different way. And I did, even when people were next to me going, just go do that for 2 hours a week on the weekends, man. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain this to you. I think it's bigger. And
Yeah.
it worked. And now I'm at this second, I think, inflection point where I'm like, now I can jump again But as I mentioned earlier, I think you have to leap, then the net appears. It doesn't come the other way, unfortunately. You have to.
Well, I've always found it interesting because I feel like there's the ability to have communication reach, and then there's monetization of that is a different conversation,
Yes.
and potentially a different problem to solve, because and to find the intersection, it may not always be what you think the obvious solution is,
Correct.
and it's tough.
So with podcasting, with every different type of media, there's a different math formula, right? So first of all, if you have a podcast and you try to monetize, you have to understand that your podcast, the audio that you make, is not your product. Your product is the audience. The fact
Right.
that you have 1,000 people showing up every week or something like that. Once you realize that, then you realize 15 seconds times 1,000 listens times 12 months is valuable. So what I used to do in the beginning, I used to walk around the expo hall at CSM and I would do the math. I would have the APTA brochure and be like, how much is a 10 by 10 square? Well, $5,000. How much do you think that booth costs? How much do you think it costs to fly it here? How many people you have working? So I within a couple grand could figure out how much a company spent. And then I knew, working for companies, that, you know, when you go up to a booth, they want you to scan your badge because that's how they get your email address.
Right.
I knew a good day in a booth was 150 scans. And I'm like, hang on a minute. I know math. Divide the cost by how many email addresses, knowing that not every email address is going to convert to a client. You're willing to spend that much money just for 3 days a year. What are you doing the other 362 days a year? And that's when I would go to them and be like, same thing as you. It's like, I got 60,000 listens a month and I'm doing it 4 times a week and it reaches people. So understanding what your product actually is. The podcast is the sugar that attracts an audience, and the audience wins. They're paying though with their time. You can get someone to pay because a company to pay typically because they understand what a connection is actually worth.
Yeah.
That's what I do now, but that's just the fun part. Like, I want to figure out what I do. I want to figure out what, like, cause I'm in your Facebook group. I see what you guys do. You coach, but you foster connection. Coaching is how, connection is what. People pay for what.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think that's, looking at it's interesting. Like the monetization of a channel of attention is worth X, right?
Right.
And frankly, the smaller and the more narrow it is, it's actually worth more
Right.
per person than if it's big and broad, right? So there's that. Then from what I see, there's levels above it, right? So there's I have a friend that he's always like, he calls it industry skipping. He's like, don't skip industries, just figure out how you can sell more of what your people need and actually value within the current industry, right? Because I think for some people, they look at it, they're like, oh, well, now I can be the chiropractic guy and the athletic trainer guy and all these things, right? He's just like, well, he's like, no, it's how do you create more solutions to problems for people that you already have attention for, and they call that vertical integration in other sectors, right? So vertical integration, but then from there, there's like stages above that, which are like consulting, but then it's like education of things that you're really good at that you can share with other people, or it's to build something on top of that, which would be something like another business, which potentially could be media related, it could be marketing related, it could be these other things that make sense that you're uniquely good at from the hours and hours and hours you put into something like this. But I think the challenge is it's so hard to say, well, this isn't just the thing anymore, because you might be able to make enough advertising dollars to have a comfortable life, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the thing that's going to be the biggest impact, or the thing maybe that you feel the most challenged with, you're going to be able to do. And that's where it gets really challenging, because then you got to sometimes scrap the shit that's doing well to then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I'm at the point now where I thought, because I worked for a couple big companies, I worked for a hospital system, and I was like, this is going to be great. I'm going to have all these resources. And the hospital system, when you were describing the Army, it felt a lot like the hospital system. Big boat, has a lot of people on it, but like no change. And I was like, but I'm the change. You hired me to do the change thing. We're going to change things. And they're like, yeah, no. And then I figured out why a lot of times organizations like that don't like to change. The people within those organizations, like the spot that they have earned, because it took them 10 years to get there, they don't need the new guy changing stuff, because that might change their position. And that's not me being like, annoyed and jealous. That was what was instructed to me. And then I said, no, I'm just going to be the guy who shows up with solutions. I don't care who gets credit. And then I watched as that nothing would change, because the people who were making the decisions were like, we don't need the boat rocked. to use
Right.
that analogy. So then
Don't do it.
I said, I want to go to the flip side. I'll just be a consultant. I'll roll in, work for a company 2 days a week, right? 4 hours here, 4 hours there, whatever. And the problem with that is people like your buddy will show up when you're there, right? You tell me to show up 2 hours a week or 2 hours a day, I'll show up. When I leave, a lot of times they're like, well, we didn't know how to do, you showed us, but then when you left, we sort of got confused and then you weren't here. So we didn't do anything until you came back. So you realize it's behavior change 1-to-1 and it's behavior change 1 to company. And I'm like, well, I'm not getting satisfied with that either. There's some progress, but it takes a while. So I don't know. I keep doing the same thing in different ways. I think the way that I ultimately will end up is the one I like the most, not necessarily the one that brings the most money, because I've had that. And if it's not great, it's a real sucky, like you said, orthopedic surgery or PT. One brings in more money. Should have went that way. Well, if you don't like get out of bed in the morning, put your pants on, that way sucks.
I'm interested though. Like, so if you're like, all right, in a perfect world, you can turn this into whatever you want. And let's say like 3 years down the road, like, is there something you're like, man, this would be awesome. I don't know how this works yet, but like, you have like this
Yeah.
sort of goal?
Yeah, I think I would work for, now I won't say how, I'll say like, I'll do what I did with you, with what I think you did was you kept looking for the ingredients. What is the nitrogen and oxygen and all that carbon that you need to be here? I need to be with people, multiple people on the same team. Like they need to be with me in the boat, like in the rowboat, not just on the cruise ship. So it's like, yeah, I can work for a hospital system, but I need to have a team of people who are also in this with me, working on the same projects. And a lot of times I was the only person working on the project. Like I was just the communications guy and I was meant to do everything by myself. And I'm like, well, who am I supposed to talk to? And they're like, no one, because we're all busy, but you're going to go off and do the thing. So I need to be around other people. That is a must. And I haven't had that. And that is a must. I have to have some creative license. Like I don't care how you solve the problem, but I'm going to give you, you got $1,000 and 30 days. I'm like, great. That's kind of, I need a little guideposts, but I don't need to be shown how to do everything. And then a clear goal. Oh, and the thing that I'm solving has to be worth it. Like I could have stayed in radio, but that boat was sort of sinking. But also like I was in my mid 30s or no, my early 30s. And I was like, selling pickup trucks and beer and concert tickets is cool. But you know what would be cooler? This PT thing looks like this is life-changing. So that was one thing that drew me to PT away from radio, was when radio was sinking. I was like, well, if I can go anywhere, where would I want to go? I'm like, so it also has to be meaningful. So I would say with other people, it has to be creative and meaningful, as in the thing. That's why I probably stayed in communications in PT, because I really do honestly and 100% truly believe in the product or service. It's more of a service. The service that PTs provide is, I honestly believe that. So that's easy for me. It's always easier for people to sell stuff you actually believe in. Wouldn't look at that? Wouldn't you know it? Get someone who honestly believes in it. Be like, then how do I sell? Talk about it. Talk about what it looks like when tell me a story about. I like when you guys post on your social media about when people report back, or you do a great thing. You guys do it like you share screenshots. You're like, I'm not even editing this. I'm going to share. This is what someone said. Look, there it is. Yeah. Do you want this? Come over here. Isn't that the best way to communicate? It's like, look at this. Do you want this?
It's the easiest way. I mean, I think it's frankly the one of the more effective ways, because also, like, I've had people and they're like, you made this image. I'm like, dude, I don't fucking understand how to make any image. Like,
giving you too much credit.
Well, like because we hide their names. Like I don't
right.
want my people who we work with. I'm not trying to pimp them out. Right. It's just like, I'll hide their name and, hey, but this is like what they sent us and they're cool with it. And the thing is, because we keep their name anonymous, like they're more likely to want to share wins with us, because they know they can openly do it and they know who they are. And they're like, hell yeah, that's me. And no one else needs to know it. Right. That it's a real thing. But yeah, I think marketing, if you get actual results for people, it makes it very easy.
Marketing is, and someone else said this, is saying the same thing 1,000 different ways. So it could be like in PT, how do you market PT? I'm like, well, what does PT provide? It changes your life. Let's say that was the thing that you think you sell. Great. Now I need you to go and say it 999 other ways every single day for 999 days. And if that doesn't work, no one has the problem you're solving. But we know they do, so they will be the path to your door. So let me reverse engineer your question to me. This is me using your time to benefit me, because everything is selfish in podcasting.
That's it. That's what I did.
How would you describe, because you've changed your jobs, but I don't think you've ever actually changed the things that are involved in what you do. Is like you left the military, you went to work with Kelly and did that, but I feel like you knew without being able to verbalize maybe what you needed in each thing, and then you knew when it was getting less and when to jump ship.
Hmm.
So what are the things that you have now that you're like, this is why it's my thing? Because I think I need help finding it.
I have found this for me, it's like, frankly, it's like one word, and it's momentum. I feel like I really want to feel like I'm making progress towards something that is beneficial to other people. Like that's pretty much it, right? So, physical therapy, all right, I'm helping people with an injury. It's just one to one, which is fine. Which and for a lot of people that might be all they want. It's still
Right.
an incredibly beneficial,
Not
important
better
thing
or
to do.
worse. It's just different. One to one or
No, yeah,
whatever.
it's not better or worse. In fact, I could go back to seeing patients and be very happy. Like it wouldn't bother me one bit. But then, from there, it's like, okay, now I get a chance to educate, and now I'm helping clinicians be better clinicians. I mean, that's frankly why I left the military. It wasn't to start a cash practice. It was to teach for this group because I wanted to help educate and make clinicians better with this philosophy that I really found a lot of help and success with myself. So I just happened to start a business on the side because I didn't have anything else to do while I was, home. So I was home and not traveling. I was 3 to 4 times a month. I'd be gone, which is a lot. But even still, it's like I got to test this stuff. And then we start this business, right? And then from there, it's like, oh shit, this works. We can help more people locally with this. And
Yeah.
then we started have to learn how to become a better business owner. And then from there, it's like, well, if it's like, what's the next step, right? So I've helped, let's call it, 4,000 people in the city of Atlanta with our practice over a 10-year period. In the last 12 months, the people in our mastermind program in PT Biz alone have helped close to 70,000 new people in the last 12 months. If you put those people into an arena, it sells out
It's
Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. It's
wild.
crazy, right? So
Wild.
it's like, okay, that's a lot of momentum, and so for us, like, there's so much more to be had there. I don't know what I'm going to do, next, or I guess whatever that next step is. All I know is it's going to end up being something that allows me to have a bigger impact on people in some way that I find valuable.
Right.
That I'm not trying to have impact on everybody, just the people that I find valuable, that I want to help as best we can. And it has to do with momentum and learning something new and feel like I'm making progress, and to do so in some vehicle that is difficult at that, right? Because what I like about business is it's not an easy button. I can't
Uh-uh.
just say, oh, I want this number of clients, or I want to have this outcome happen for our clients, or whatever. It's so hard. It's such a great game to play that you're constantly having to learn and grow and develop new skills so that you can get that momentum that's ever elusive. But when I get it, dude, it's fucking
Yeah.
great. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's like golf, man. I'm awful at it until you get that one shot, and then you're like, and it's back. Oh, look at this.
It's like golf, but imagine if golf, you getting marginally better at golf increased your family's ability to do
Right.
things in the world because of income and impact and time freedom.
And you getting better at golf, you record a video of the thing that you couldn't figure out yesterday that you figured out today, and that helps 10 people, and those 10 people go help 10 more people, and that is exponential. I think that's what I
Yeah.
loved when I did the morning announcements in 6th grade. I just thought it was wild that I could say, hey, everybody, lunch today is pizza. And then I made like a funny joke, or funny to a 6th grader or whatever. And then I'd walk down the hall and someone was like, that was pretty funny, man. I'm like, wow, I did something one time
Yeah.
and it hit 400 people and 2 people found it funny. And I don't know, I couldn't have verbalized it then, but I was like, that's kind of wild that I did something and it existed. Then you throw the internet on it. I just Googled your podcast and it's still there. I don't know if we can, I'm pretty sure we can listen to it, but
I'd like to see.
you did something in 2017 and it's still, people could still learn from that. Like, that's what I hope individuals or organizations to understand is, if you honestly believe that you have something of value, and it is a disservice for you not to teach it. I would go the other way. It is unethical for you to hide that information in this day and age. How dare you not share your brilliance with the world? And if you're confused on how to do it, there's a YouTube video, or you can hire me. I'll help you, because
Right.
I've done it poorly, and then I've done it less poorly, and then I've almost done it good. And then, the algorithm changed, or whatever you want to say. And I've figured it out. I think I just like figuring this stuff out because I like it. I think you like figuring out your stuff because you like it. So what's the kind of business you should be in? The one you like.
Well, it's also the one that allows you to solve problems that are meaningful to you. And I think
Right.
that's the thing that's, for you that's going to be interesting is it's just, it's this sort of crossroads that people end up in. And people listening to this, they can have the same thing happen, right? Like that happened with me, or even on a small scale. Maybe it's just that you want to switch to a different clinic. Maybe there's a clinic that makes more sense for what you're trying to do. Maybe you want to dive into a different niche because you're interested in it, but you've been focused on this other one. And you're like, oh my God, I have to relearn these things and I'm not going to be very good at it. And
That
it's just
sucks
like,
people a lot.
yeah, it's like,
Because I think we look at things linear. Well, I went to high school, then I went to college, then I got a job, and now I'm supposed to get promoted in that job and stay in that because 20 years is better than 10 years. And I think valuable is important, not
yeah.
status, but that's hard to let go of.
Yeah. And it's like, if life's a big video game, like level up as much as you
Wow.
can, like try to have the highest score you can have. And to everybody, I mean, the thing is like, it's your game. You know what I'm saying? Like it's, if what you really value is being the greatest clinician in your city, then be the damn greatest clinician in your city. If what you value is work-life balance and being able to coach all your kids teams and then to do that, right? Then like focus on that, but at least be intentional about what you're trying to do and not necessarily just like, don't let every week, month, year go by and you look back and you ask yourself, have I actually made any progress or am I in the same exact place?
Right. Because you got nobody to blame. And then regret is heavy.
Totally.
Regret
Yeah.
is heavy. I mean,
And we see it. And think about how many people we work with that are older that we get a chance to help. And if you actually just shut the fuck up and listen to them,
they'll tell you
you can learn a lot of really cool stuff.
tons.
It's amazing. It's like one of the best benefits of the profession, and we take it for granted. But the average person doesn't get to have conversations with people on all different age demographic spectrums of employment and all kinds of things on a regular basis. And you got to fill that time with something, right?
Yeah.
Like, and what do? Well, we get a chance to have conversations and learn about people and learn about what they find value in or the way they view the world, and everybody can have a different perspective on it. But if you can take that and apply it to yourself, like what an amazing way to get better. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's all you got to do. Just be better at listening to people and become a better human being along the way. Like it could be as simple as that, but just
Yeah.
make progress at something.
Yeah. Yeah. First step in a good conversation. People know me as the guy who talks, and I do. I talk a lot. I can't shut me up most of the time, but I do read and look and watch and listen a ton. Otherwise, I kind of don't, I remember we were learning subjective exam in ortho in PT school, and all my classmates, I call them like kids because they were all like 10 years younger than me. And they were like,
Yeah.
well, what are the 10 questions you should ask in what order? And I was like, how do you know the second question? They haven't answered the first.
Right.
And they were like, but this is a list, because they went to school and they kept going to school, and that's when they landed in PT school. I did the other thing where I was like, oh, the second question matters, but you only kind of know it after you listen to the answer to the first question, or you read their body language from across the or something. And the funny part is, once people grasp that, they get real free. Like they get like, oh, I'm a part of this. I go, you're a freaking big part of this, my man. Like, yes, this is terribly important, but it actually puts the focus back on them, because they're telling you a lot, verbally, non-verbally, paraverbally, whatever. And then what you do with it is that's the magic, people. I'm not saying don't use your hands. I'm saying you got to use all of it, and they're giving you a lot of information.
Yeah. No, the listening is the most important part, right? It's like it's giving you the clues needed or the pieces needed to be able to construct the puzzle that you're trying to put back together. And I think it takes people a long time to realize that, because
Yeah.
you're right. For me, I just was like, okay, what's the sensitivity and specificity of this test? And so is it a labral tear or is it rotator, impingement? And who fucking cares? Like it's really, why are they there? What are they trying to do?
Right.
And do they trust you? You know what I'm saying? Like that's it. But that took me 5 years to figure out. So if you're listening to this and you're in school, like, please God, just listen to people and try to figure out why they're there.
This is where the phrase "don't listen to what I say, watch what I do" came in. And I'm not knocking, I won't say who my CI was, but I had a good CI. And then there was other guy in the clinic who, for whatever reason, I decided he was a really good clinician. Well, number one, people kept asking for him by name. And I just noticed this dude barely did, like, he said very little. And I was like, he's not doing it. He doesn't care. And they're like, oh no, he's super good. And then I watched, he communicated and listened so skillfully that it looked like he was barely, it's like watching someone who like knows judo or something, barely like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like they barely move. And you're like, how'd that guy whip that guy's ass? Like he knew what to do, when to do it, and exactly how much to do it when. And that takes reps. But instead of don't just listen to what I say, watch what I do, it's like, watch what they're doing or how they're doing it. Ask them why did you do that, not this? Then listen to that answer. And then you can apply that somewhere else. It's not a checklist. But it's wild when you watch someone who's in flow, this state of like they're just doing the thing they were built to do at the highest level. It's a wild thing to watch.
Yeah. No, it's awesome.
All right,
It's
last
awesome.
last thing.
Listen, I was going to say, I'm excited to see what you do in the future, man.
Me too.
Whatever it is, I'm here to help too. If you want to chat about it, you can always do that too.
All right. Last thing we usually do on the show, and I don't know if I ever told anybody this on the podcast. When I first started interviewing people, I was a student, and I would talk to people, and these were all like professors and like people I looked up to. I never knew how to be like, all right, all right, we're done. Like we got to end this, right? So I came up with the parting shot because it had the word parting in it, and shot because ha ha ha, alcohol, whatever, 2 shots. But that's where parting shot came from. It was like, I was asking her, I'm like, how do I wrap it up? And she goes, how would you wrap up an interview in radio? I was like, oh, I would do like a shticky thing, like a game or whatever. I play a sound effect. And she goes, do that. And I was like, oh yeah. So we do parting shots. Last chance for like a mic drop moment or a soapbox statement. Anything you'd want to leave. What would your parting shot be with this conversation?
Wow. Man, I don't know. I guess we talked about a lot of things. I appreciate just the conversation. And it's been fun to do more podcasts like this that are a little less structured.
Yeah.
I hope other people find it as enjoyable as I do, because it's just nice to be able to talk to people that are really have a deep understanding of the profession in different ways, and to just sort of like see where there's alignment or where maybe there's some disagreement, and to be able to view things slightly differently. So, I think that being said, being able to get outside of your little bubble and have conversations with people that are face to face or like this, via the interwebs, however this works, I don't know, and actually be able to like talk through some things that are important to you with people that maybe don't view the world the exact same way, or come from a different part of the country, or have a different background. I feel like that's such an important thing to have a different, well-rounded lens on the world, on where you're trying to go. And it's frankly fun because it allows you to learn. It allows you to really grow in a way that you don't if you just stay in your isolated, world with the people that are exactly like you. And it's not as much fun, honestly. So that's what I would say. Get out, have a conversation with somebody, and try to learn something from somebody else that didn't grow up like you did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember a long time ago when one of my professors was like, what's your goal with this podcast? I was like, I don't know. I'm just messing around. She's like, well, like, what do you hope to get out of it? Like, be intentional, sort of what you were saying. And I was like, oh, let me think about that. And I think it came back a day later and I was like, I want to have fun and learn stuff. Are those goals? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, then I want to do that. And she's like, with every episode, I go, yeah, I want to have fun and learn one thing. And if I can learn 2, but at least 1. And she's like, I feel like that's a great goal. Because and I forget who told the story. I think it was John Lennon told the story about his son, or maybe Julian Lennon told the story about his dad. Whereas, John Lennon, the former, Beatle, was like, the key to life, or the goal in life, is happiness. So Julian Lennon apparently, and I think I'm telling this right, went to school, and the teacher said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Julian Lennon said, I want to be happy. And the teacher said, I don't think you understand the question. And he said, I don't think you understand life. And it's such a John Lennon Beatle-y thing. I don't even know if it ever actually happened, but I was like, yeah, happy. Like, for me, happy is having fun and learning stuff. And I think you can apply that. The good thing is too, it's sort of universal. You can apply it anywhere and everywhere. Personal life, professional life, like business life, non-business, friends, family, it doesn't matter. Have fun, learn stuff. What else is there?
Well, I think you bring up a good point, and we will finish this podcast at some point, I promise. But this is like for people that feel frustrated or stagnant, or they're sad, whatever, and they feel stuck. A lot of people feel this way. A lot of people in our profession can feel this way.
Yeah.
But just in general, what I've found, at least, is you brought this up, learning things.
Yeah.
Learning things is it's the key
Cheat code
to progress, and progress makes you feel accomplished. It makes you feel better about yourself. It could literally be the littlest thing, right? It could be you're feeling stuck, or you're unsure of why you feel, unsatisfied. And it's like, okay, well, what is something? And it doesn't even have to relate to your career. It could be anything. It could be reading something. Maybe you want to learn more about, I don't know, some sort of history, or you want to learn more about physical health that you're trying to improve yourself, the littlest things and making these small incremental changes over time is really where
Only
you
way.
start to come back to a very positive mental framework. And from there, it's a jumping off point to making lots of bigger changes in your life. So but I think many people, and I agree with you, learning is something that I find so enjoyable. And I'm not a school guy.
Right.
Like I'm not a school guy. I didn't do great in school. I had to work really hard. It wasn't something that came natural to me, but it's something that like once you realize you can learn anything
Right.
and that learning is a positive feedback loop. It's like, wow, what a secret. Amazing thing to know and to apply to make yourself really, feel better and work towards things that are going to improve your life. And it's as simple as, just putting some effort into it. I think a lot of people, they don't realize that and they just feel stuck. But the best way to unstick yourself, I guess, in maybe Dr. Seuss said it that way,
Right.
is just
Have fun.
learn something, do something that's going to improve or you're going to grow in some way.
Motion creates emotion, right? Like motion is momentum, right? I don't care. Like was it a general or an admiral? The guy was like, make your bed, right? And it's like, why? It's like, because you've done one
Admiral
thing.
McCraven.
Right. You've done one thing. Like you've done one. Okay. And now do two things or who cares what they are, right? And as dumb as and self-helpy as that might sound, like it works for me now. And the 20-year-old me would have made fun of it, but the 44-year-old version of me is like, okay, I'm in. I'm bought in on this.
Yeah, well, listen, neither of us are Tony Robbins. We're not trying, I'm not selling you a self-help program or something
Right.
like that, and honestly, yeah, you're right. 10 years ago, I'd be like, shut the fuck up, get back to work, Danny.
Trying hard.
Yeah, like just go try harder.
Right.
And there's something to be said for trying hard. Like,
Right.
put some effort in, man. Try hard. Like if you literally actually just put effort in over an extended period of time, you're gonna be better off than 95% of
Correct.
people around you. The vast majority of people are lazy and they give up easily. And it's just easier than ever to be better than other people because as a society, I think we just frankly are, passive in a lot of ways. And yes, and we just give up. Like people give up. So, but it's true. If you really look at the things that you can take pride in, look at something as simple as like cut your fucking grass, cut your grass, and you're gonna feel better about yourself because you're gonna look at it and you're gonna be like, damn, hell yeah, look at that yard, looks awesome, and that's great. You made progress that day, but like just do things like that to push yourself forward, and don't just sit around and wish that things were better. Don't just sit around and hope that something changes. It ain't gonna change shit.
Yeah.
You got to do it yourself, And the sad thing is, you might feel really sad about something. You might feel really, like the world is against you. And maybe it has been for a little while, but guess what? You can't change that.
No.
You got to pick something, do something that's going to improve every single day, as small as it might be. And then you start to right the ship and you start to get in a better spot. And from there, you can change and do whatever you want from there. So anyway, that's it. We'll leave it on that, our little Tony Robbins moment. Take it if you want it. If not, whatever.
Danny, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, so fun, man.